Go.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Sorry for the little delay, a little technical difficulty, but good evening. My name is Marjorie Gans, and I'm a member of the board of the Writers' Room of Boston. I am delighted that you could join us this evening for the October reading in our virtual series, Readings from the Room, which began in March 2021. So for anyone new to us, the Writers' Room of Boston is a co-working space in downtown Boston for any and all writers, both established and emerging, who want or need a quiet place to write. The room is open 24 hours a day, and it provides desks and silence, and also the quiet companionship of other writers. The Writers' Room of Boston has been serving writers of the greater Boston area since 1993. And if you're curious about it or have any questions, please check out our Facebook page, our Instagram posts at Writers of Boston, and our newly redesigned website. There are photos there, announcements, and you can find recordings of the past readings on the website as well. We would be delighted to have new members, and we have different levels of membership now, including a virtual membership for those who can't easily make it to the room in downtown Boston. And if you're interested, please contact our program director, Leslie Ostro, at info@writersroomofboston.org. In 2021, we launched this new reading series as a way to reach out to the writing community during the pandemic. And it was a way to share the wonderful writing from both those established and emerging writers, some of whom call the Writers' Room home, but we've been lucky enough to have writers really from all over the country because of Zoom. We've been able to get writers from different backgrounds and representing a real range of genres, and we hope to continue that. So some of the readers have been at the Writers' Room, but others we have been able to just contact and invited, and they've been happy to join us. So tonight we have two former fellows, Tori Weston, a writer, and Shirley Jones-Luke, a poet. As we go along, feel free to use the question and answer feature in the box at the bottom of the screen. You can type your questions in there, and we'll have time at the end for questions for each writer. The series is made possible by grants from the Mass Cultural Council, the Boston Cultural Council, and also we rely on friends. So if you enjoy this program, please consider making a contribution using the donate button at the bottom of the screen. Also, we will be recording this reading, and a replay will be available on our website. Our first reader is Tori Weston. Tori has an MFA in creative writing from Emerson College. Her work has appeared in the Providence Journal Bulletin, Sleep Magazine, Memoir Magazine, Under the Gum Tree, and Creative Nonfiction's Sunday Shorts. She's also been featured on the podcast Risk and featured in the book about the podcast titled Risk: True Stories People Never Thought They'd Dare to Share. Most recently, she was featured in the documentary We Are Here Too, which highlights 4 female artists of color navigating the global pandemic and social justice uprising of 2020. You can learn more about Tori at her website, ToriWestonWriterArtist.com. Tori, it is all yours.
Hello. All right, so before I start reading, I am going to preface with the trigger warning, just so everyone will know. And also for my first piece, I refer to something called the Weekly Reader, which if you're a child of the 80s, you know that the Weekly Reader was an educational classroom magazine that was sent to children at their elementary schools. So the first piece is entitled January 28th, 1986, A Prose Sestina. The Weekly Reader prepared us for what was going to happen that day. For 2 years, my classmates and I read every article about the NASA Teacher in Space program. Which American teacher will teach from space? In Woonsocket, Rhode Island at Kevin K. Coleman Elementary School, We were getting ready for this science lesson from the cosmos. Our schoolyard games transitioned from kickball and Red Rover to astronauts and aliens. With Krista McAuliffe, we girls had proof that we too could be astronauts and insisted on being included in the schoolyard space games that the boys had previously denied us access to. In the Weekly Reader, we read articles about how the astronauts trained with NASA, and in our small Rhode Island school, we prepared. Science became exciting. The space between what was possible and impossible was closing. 1986 was going to be an exciting year. In January, the month I turned 10 years old, a New England teacher would teach a lesson from the Challenger. Whenever someone in my class had a birthday, my teacher would bring in chocolate and vanilla cupcakes. At the end of the day, we would sing the birthday song, eat cupcakes, and play games. This year, for my birthday, my mom was going to take me out to dinner, just the two of us. I wasn't prepared to make the transition from kid parties to celebrating in a grown-up space. My plan was to tell her about my newfound love of science and ask if she would let me go to one of NASA's camps for kids. She won't do a science experiment on the spaceship. It would float away, one of my friends said. We had so many questions about how this teacher would teach on a spaceship. Could she really give homework from space? Would the lesson be a series of games, or would she assign an experiment? How prepared do we need to be for this lesson? Will NASA do this every year? On the morning of my 10th year on Earth, my mom allowed us to watch TV while we got ready for school. I was excited to watch a science lesson from space and have birthday cupcakes with my class later that day. While eating a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios, I prepared myself to watch the Challenger blast off. I remember the camera cutting to Krista McAuliffe's son, whose entire class was at Cape Canaveral. We all watched the teacher and the rest of the astronauts board the shuttle. Standing in front of the TV, my siblings and I yelled the countdown, watched the shuttle blast off, and like a video game, split into various lines of white smoke. I wondered aloud, did they make it to space? In the schoolyard, no one played. We all talked about space and whether or not the spaceship made it there. No one cared that I was celebrating my 10th year. This kid, Patrick, convinced us it was a game because, as his mom told him, explosions that happened on TV weren't real. All the science, all the articles we read never talked about O-rings and explosions. Are the teachers and the astronaut dead? One of my classmates asked our teacher. She left the room in tears. No cupcakes were prepared that day. No birthday song was sung to me. After school, every TV channel showed the Challenger launching off and exploding into diverting trails of white smoke. It was then that I began to think that science was not as fun. I also thought about the teacher's son with his classmates looking up at the white smoke sky and wondering if what happened was real. The sitcom Punky Brewster prepared an episode to talk about the Challenger explosion, something the adults in our lives didn't know how to do. Space exploration before that day seemed fun, safe, and a place where smart people could lead to amazing discoveries, where someone could be far from Earth and still teach school. My 10th year, I realized exploring the unknown and attempting to do something ordinary in an extraordinary place had severe consequences. We no longer played space games. Instead, we learned that some sad things can never be said out loud, that death was something to be silent about. My next piece is called Birthday Cake. 13. Tomorrow I'm going to be 13. I close my eyes and try to imagine what my party will be like, what 13 will be like. Just a few hours ago, my sister, my cousin, and I decorated my grandmother's basement with blue and white streamers and shiny gold letters that read "Happy Birthday." My mom has promised that my birthday cake would no longer be in the shape of Smurfette, Strawberry Shortcake, or any other cartoon character. It's 1989, and I am now a young woman and deserve a cake that is a little more sophisticated and grown up. I feel hot. Maybe the heat is turned on too high. My mom always mentions that our apartment gets too hot. I kick off the covers and wonder if it's too hot for ice cream cake. An ice cream birthday cake would be nice, but my mom says that no one would want to eat an ice cream cake in the middle of January. As the salty taste of his sweat touches my lips, I wonder if my birthday party will be like the school dances, bouncing and getting sweaty to my prerogative, or slow dancing and grinding to Roni. Lying still and stiff, I close my eyes tight and try to think about blowing out my candles, but my chest feels too heavy to inhale. His heavy breathing, hot, short puffs of air against my ear. It burns, not the way birthday candles do. 13. He said that this will happen anyway to girls like me, girls who think they know more than adults, girls like me who think they know everything. I ignore his words and what he's doing. It's pushing away the thoughts of birthday cake. Cake with chocolate frosting and those candy letters that melt in your mouth. 13. Tomorrow I'm going to be 13, and there will be chocolate cake with sprinkles and candy letters that spell my name. My mom tells me that I can choose who can come to my party. I can choose who can have cake. Tomorrow, when I turn 13, I will tell her that he can't come to my party. I will tell her that he can't have any birthday cake. And the last piece is called The Day I Got My Life Back. From the outside looking in, it seemed like we were just a normal family having dinner. My stepfather placed prominently at the head of the table, my mother at the other end. All the delicious food, chicken parmesan, green beans, and garlic bread lined neatly in the middle. My two sisters, my brother, and I were strategically seated on either side, two on the left-hand side of my stepfather, and me and my other sibling on his right. After the platters of food were passed around, my mother pressed me to say the blessing. Losing faith in the words I mumbled, I ended with a barely audible amen. My stepfather tore into the food on his plate, shoveling it into his mouth, while my siblings talked about school. I watched the man who preyed on me nightly consume his meal. For a moment, our eyes locked, and then his pupils grew big, and he opened his mouth as if he was going to say something, but no words came out. I noticed the veins on the side of his neck pop out, lines of blue against caramel-colored skin. His nostrils flared open, as if they would suck all the air out of the room. His hands reached for his throat, covering the scar from his attempted suicide months earlier. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed that he was choking. They didn't. In that moment, I thought about how he lied to my mom, lied about abusing me, telling her I was making up stories to tear them apart. I thought about his attempted suicide and wondered if the choking was another attempt at killing himself, but this time in front of all of us, a collective punishment for telling the truth. His newfound relationship with God, how he testified in church, how he spoke against the devil, said the devil tried to break up his family. All of these thoughts kept me in my seat. If I didn't move, the late night visits would stop. I would be able to sleep. But if I didn't do anything, his death could make him a parental martyr, a righteous man who died with his family around him, a story that would be used for Sunday sermons. As his light brown skin began to turn blue around his cheeks, I knew then, in order to save myself, I had to save him. I pushed my chair back so hard that the wooden legs screeched and got everyone's attention. I wrapped my arms around him and pressed as hard as my 14-year-old hands could into the space below his chest. Imitating the video I watched in health class, I squeezed and squeezed. The remains of his meal dribbled out of his mouth and onto his plate, and my siblings left the table in disgust. My mother ran to her husband, wrapping him in her arms, asking him over and over if he was all right. While he coughed up and sucked in the life-giving air, he looked over at me. As I returned to my seat and cut the contents of my meal into smaller pieces, I smiled at him and feasted. He knew I had the power, like God, if only for a few seconds, to take as well as give life. The day I got my life back, I discovered the God in me and that she had the power to love, hate, and be oh so benevolent. That's it.
Yeah, that's more than it. That's wonderful. And I'm going to take a breath and move on, and we will come back. So thank you, Tori. And let's move to our next reader. We have Shirley Jones-Luke. Shirley is a poet and a writer living in Dorchester, Mass. She also has an MFA from Emerson College, and her poetry has been published in several journals and magazines, such as Anti-Heroin Chic, Blaze, Vox, and Longleaf Review. Shirley was the 2020 winner of the Patricia Dobler Poetry Prize. She is currently working on a poetry collection. So Shirley, it's yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, Tori, for that wonderful way to start this evening out. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to listen to our work. I am Shirley Jones-Luke, as Marjorie said, and I'm a poet, writer, educator, and fashionista, and all that good things. So I'll be reading at least 3 pieces, maybe a 4th, if time permits, from that I'm working on for my current collection. It's tentatively titled Traumaland. Bring this up. Here we go. This first piece is entitled Big Belly Hunger. Blood pressure, hypertense in this dimension. Sugar toddlers rinse. Glucose gibberish drops on the high chair. Breathing is ours. Breathing secrets in towers. Prospects had no powers, in survival mode, need to eat for hollow stomachs make for crying babies. Federal money and hood pennies, everybody's confused. Rate isn't average, math failure, weight is above average, weighing heavily in the community. Passing COVID like a pickup game, old man wheezing while lame. Diseases in the hood are above average, rates of death give you the idea. Irregular corporations investigate the USDA, stop giving the hood the business. Doing laps in golden pools, these corporate giants living like Olympic fools, gods of water that mires the community, disease covering everything with impunity. We can blame the government, the corporations for our failed expectations and self-ending ways. Moms are crying for days, accumulating tears along with fears that another child will be lost. What is that long cost? Food deserts over a foggy skyline demonstrate the streets are fatal, aggressively stealing our babies. This is why mothers pine. This is why we kill ourselves. Our fate is like we're learning to feed ourselves. It does make sense now, but not much. Pig is the meal of the enslaved, now of cookouts. At stake is the funds. At the end of that account, bank says you're overdrawn. Money is gone. Your plate is an account. Stroke your belly, blood pressure is still high. You wonder why, but your face is twisted like a snout, your heart pounding its weight at an uneven rate. We disc growling bellies, tired of waiting for meals, carrying slaughter in our minds, our souls, they feel and miss the fullness of our stomachs. So that's big belly hunger. The next poem is entitled Inheritance. Inheritance. I am the daughter of a beautiful Black woman, a mix of Caribbean spice, Southern warmth, and Northern instincts. My mother, with deep brown skin, dimpled cheeks, and loving smile, imparted within me the importance of an education, of appearance and decorum. I was into books, dressed in clean clothes, and kept my ghetto urges in check until I became an adult and could make choices of my own. I have my grandmother's accent, West Indian twang. I slur my words, especially three and tree, both sounding the same, coupled with my Boston upbringing. The women in my family taught me how to embrace who I am and who I will be in this mad world where violence is king. Women bring so much to this world that bends, breaks, slaps, and shakes their bodies until they're wilted flowers. But I am a rose with thorns so sharp, I cut through this violent planet like steel, because my will is a blade, leaving its mark on all who threaten me, just like my mother and grandmother expect me to be. And that is Inheritance. The next poem is Daughter of the Hidden Bruise. Daughter of the Hidden Bruise. Daddy was a hammer, pounding on your soul, a little girl's body, a child wrapped in fear. Your flesh buckled, your flesh trembled. How could you go on? It was abuse before it became domestic violence, women in silence, crying in corners as men raged against the demons in their spirits, targeting their anger against bodies already broken from love lost. You watched your mama take his fists unto herself, protecting you with her life. That's what mamas do. You couldn't help her. How did you feel as you watched? Why do men pretend that love is pain? Daddy was a man who used pain as punishment for all the years he suffered under racist oppression as a child in Georgia and as a man living in this country that did not want him for who he was. But who are you, child? A victim? No. A daughter of daughters who didn't let beatings, hunger, and threats stop them from existing in America as you saw your mama turn tears into defiance, defiance into strength, raising grandma's cast iron skillet, striking back against daddy. The scars on your soul became armor, shielding you from daddy's blows, strengthening your spirit as your fear melted and anger rose like a drumbeat in your heart, turning fear into power and power into voice until you knew that the bruises were no longer painful and meant you would survive. And my last piece, second. A sonnet for flowers laid on the grave of injustice. Church bells sound to announce the defeated. Here lies the concept of injustice, vanquished by the just soldiers of equality, fighting inequities and battling bias into submission, while injustice watched, sending its minions after minions, assumptions, stereotypes, white privilege, all fell at the swords of tolerance and an understanding, until injustice sent its mightiest warrior, white supremacy, lunged at the soldiers, throwing boulders the size of hatred, tossing spears dipped in racism's poison, causing the soldiers to duck and dodge, but they would not give up, defending, delivering the final blow, and injustices ending. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley, for that reading. So that is two wonderful readings that we've had, and we're running, because we got a little bit of a late start, we're running up against a time limit. But Tori, if you could come back, we have a little bit of time. I know what I said when we met earlier was that we would have time for questions, and the two of you thought you might want to ask each other questions. And I don't want to put you on the spot. If you would like to do that, you can. Shirley, you can also bring yourself back. That's great. We want to see you again, and you can unmute yourself, Tori. So did you have questions for each other, or I have a question? Oh, and there may be a question answer down here.
I don't
yes.
have a question, but I just want to say how awesome it is to read with Shirley. We were in workshops when we were in grad school at Emerson, so it's good to see some of this work in different forms. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. Since I did get to see some early, she got to see earlier drafts of what I read tonight. So it's been, yeah.
Great.
And it was great to hear, Tori, your reading. A lot of what you read sort of like mirrors my upbringing in a lot of ways. So, and you probably just got me to kickstart my nonfiction writing again, because I haven't done that in a while because I've been focused on the poetry. But I think it's time to dust off some of those stories and get them out into the world.
Yes, there's one in particular that comes to mind, but we can talk about that offline, that I've always wanted you to finish.
So I'm going to go ahead and run over, and if people need to leave, they could leave. There are two questions in the question Q&A at the bottom. So let me read those to give our audience their due. The first question is for Tori. It's, did your experience of the Challenger disaster shape your becoming a writer?
I think, yeah, probably when I was 10 was when the first time I started exploring writing. But I think that birthday, because it was such a devastating moment, I think it made me pay attention to how people talk. I think that was it's a small part of the piece that I wrote about, but the reaction of my teacher when one of the students asked if it was real, that has always stuck in my mind. So I think what that moment did was I paid more attention to how adults reacted to things kids would say. I don't think my classmates really noticed, but I began to notice the way, especially on that day, the way the adults moved around and how they were reacting wasn't what a normal, it kind of gave me the sense this doesn't happen all the time. So if they're upset, why aren't we upset? So I think it made me pay attention to people's behaviors more, which then as I started to write more, I was just like, oh, okay, this is how you write down someone's reaction, or pay attention to how people say with their words, or, stuff. So it started the curiosity of people, watching people.
Which is pretty central to writing. So
yes.
Thank you. And there are three more questions, and they're all kind of related, but I'm not going to try and fuse them because they're from anonymous and I don't know who did, but I'm going to put two sort of together, and I think they're really for both of you. I'm going to make them for both of you. One, given sort of these pieces and how personal they are, each of you, your poetry, Tori, your nonfiction, did you ever consider putting the pieces in the third person? And what's it like to read such personal, emotional work out loud? And this person honors your bravery for that, which I do as well. So it's both related to sort of how personal and deep these pieces are.
Okay, I'll let Shirley, you go first.
Okay, thank you, Tori. Okay, so basically poetry has helped me in general deal with a lot of things. The last I would say 7 years of my life have been pretty rough. I had cancer, breast cancer. I'm in remission for that and still going strong. I lost my mother to complications from ovarian cancer. It's been 5 years since her passing, and my job is stressful. Personal life is stressful. So poetry has been sort of like that security blanket that when I am stressed with one of those areas, I just write. And I don't mind sharing it because my upbringing, my things that I experienced as a child, I feel has impacted me as a writer and as a person, like how to be a parent, how to be that mama that protects your children, how to make sure that you keep your children safe, in and outside the home, how to make sure that, you have outlets, self-care. Poetry is my self-care. And so I've been writing poetry since I was a kid. I've curated a whole bunch of poems online. You can read more work at allpoetry.com/SJ Luke. And it's basically like poetry that, my reactions to the world, my reflections on my world. And I have no shame in that because it has helped me a lot.
I think for myself, there's a person that I took a workshop with years ago. His name is Robin Hemley, and he always talked about, for people who write nonfiction, people will be upset with you because you wrote about them, and people will be upset with you because you did not write about them. and I feel like there's a part of me that is, by the time you are ready to release it out into the world, like, like my other writing instructor, Richard Hoffman, always says, get a good therapist. My therapist and I, by the time it reaches an audience, by the time it's ready to be released in the world, like I'm okay with everything that is out there. So I feel like by the time it reaches, like when I'm ready to send the work out and all that kind of stuff, the emotional work it took to get it on the page, to get it out there, has already been done. In terms of writing in third person, I have an essay that I've been working on for a while, which is in second person. I feel like trying to, especially when you're writing nonfiction, it depends on the way what you want to say or how you want to say it. And there are various forms of personal essay. And sometimes it's working to find out which form, like the form I read tonight, flash nonfiction, fits those situations. There are some that might fit a longer form. So sometimes it's about trying to find what form is going to fit what I want to say and how it will say best. And sometimes there are times where I'm trying to force it into a certain form, and I know, okay, this is third person, or this is going to come out better in first person. So sometimes it's just getting to the point of what is the method that's going to make it, what is the method that's going to fit the voice of what I want to say. So sometimes it does come up to finding form, finding the best way to write it, decides on whether it'll be first person, third person, second person. And other times it's just me trying to like be like, fuck it, I want to write a second person essay. It's gonna fit.
I think every writer knows that feeling. I
Yeah.
hope every writer knows that feeling.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We have run over, and I would like to say we did not lose a single audience member in our extra time, which says a credit. Exactly. And Shirley, you managed to answer the question that I didn't ask. So I appreciate it. Was, where does your poetry come from? And you told us that. So this was wonderful. I think we certainly didn't know. I didn't know when I scheduled the two of you together how sort of synchronous and good this would be. I just knew that I had two wonderful former fellow writers. So I'm going to wrap it up and thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to thank our Writers' Room president, Leslie Ostro, who doubles tonight as our tech person, without whom we could not do this. And our next reading will be November 16th. I think it's actually the second Wednesday because we didn't want to bump into Thanksgiving. I'm not sure. But our readers will be Rosanna Staffa, who is both a novelist and a playwright, and Eleanor Morse, who is a novelist. And the announcements for the readings and for the Writers' Room in general are found on the website. We got Instagram, we got Facebook. And also this is recorded. And if you want to, you can listen to the recording on our website. So good night, all. Thank you so much, both of you. This was really wonderful. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
take care.